Jason's backpack hit the ground with a heavy thud, but the pain in his chest was far worse. His hands trembled as he stood outside the principal's office, his mind racing. Had this really just happened? Had he really been expelled just because of who he was? Principal Carter's cold voice still echoed in his head. This school is for respectable families. You don't belong here. The words stung more than he wanted to admit. Jason had worked hard to be at Westbridge Academy. He had earned his place with his grades, but to them it wasn't enough. He wasn't enough. Not when his father was a simple farmer, and he showed up to school with dirt still clinging to his shoes from the morning's work. Holding back tears, Jason picked up his backpack and walked out of the building. The other students barely spared him a glance. Some whispered. Others smirked. His eyes landed on Mason, the richest kid in school, leaning against the lockers with a smug grin. Guess you finally got what you deserved, farm boy. Mason sneered. Jason clenched his jaw, but said nothing. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing him break. But deep down, he felt the weight of humiliation pressing down on him. His parents had sacrificed so much to send him here. How was he supposed to go home and tell them it was all for nothing? The walk back felt longer than ever. By the time Jason reached home, his mother was already on the porch, her worried eyes searching. His face, his father stood beside her, his expression unreadable. They expelled me, Jason mumbled. Unable to meet their gaze, his mother gasped, covering her mouth. His father let out a slow, heavy sigh before pulling him into a firm embrace. We'll figure something out, he said. But Jason could hear the uncertainty in his voice. That night, Jason lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, anger and shame burning inside him. He had done nothing wrong, yet he had been tossed aside like he was worthless. He wished, just for once, that someone with real power would see him, that someone would stand up for him. The next morning, just as students at Westbridge Academy were settling into their usual routine, a deafening roar filled the sky. A massive black helicopter appeared above the school, its powerful blades slicing through the air as it began its descent. The sound alone was enough to make every student and teacher freeze in place. Mason and his friends stood outside, laughing about yesterday's events when the gust of wind from the helicopter sent dust flying into their faces. What the? Mason shielded his eyes, trying to see through the chaos. Teachers rushed out of the building, their expressions ranging from confusion to concern. Principal Carter stormed onto the front lawn, his face red with frustration. Who authorized this? He barked, his voice struggling to carry over the deafening noise. Then, the helicopter door swung open, and for the first time, the entire school fell completely silent. A man stepped out, his presence alone enough to command attention. He was tall, dressed in a sharp black suit, his shoes polished to perfection. His sunglasses reflected the stunned faces of the crowd. But it was the golden insignia on the helicopter that sent a ripple of shock through everyone watching. Kingston Enterprises. Every student, every teacher, even Principal Carter knew that name. It was one of the largest agricultural corporations in the country, owning everything from massive farmland estates to billion-dollar food production facilities. And the man standing before them, exuding power with every step, was none other than Samuel Kingston himself, the billionaire behind it all. Principal Carter's frustration faltered, replaced by a flicker of unease. He quickly adjusted his tie, forcing a polite smile. "Mr. Kingston," he said, his voice suddenly much softer. "This is unexpected. How can I help you?" Samuel Kingston didn't reply immediately. He removed his sunglasses and scanned the crowd with a sharp gaze before finally speaking. "I am here for Jason Miller." The name spread through the school like wildfire. Jason? The farm boy they had laughed at just yesterday. The same Jason who had been thrown out of school in disgrace? Mason felt his stomach twist as he exchanged nervous glances with his friends. Principal Carter blinked. Caught off guard, he let out a forced chuckle. "Ah, Jason, I see. Well, Mr. Kingston, I'm afraid he is no longer a student at our institution." I'm aware," Kingston interrupted, his tone cool and unwavering. "That is why I am here." At that moment, miles away from the school, Jason was still in bed, staring blankly at the ceiling. He had barely slept. The humiliation from the previous day clung to him like a weight he couldn't shake. His parents had tried to console him, but their words had done little to ease the ache inside. Then he heard it, a sound so out of place in their quiet farming town that he thought he was imagining it, the unmistakable roar of a helicopter. The walls of their small house trembled slightly from the vibration. Jason shot up in bed, his heart pounding. He scrambled to the window and pulled back the curtain. His breath caught in his throat. A massive black helicopter was parked right outside their farmhouse. His father was already at the door, his face pale with confusion. Jason barely managed to throw on a shirt before rushing outside, his heart hammering in his chest. His mother clutched his father's arm, her voice barely a whisper. That's Samuel Kingston." Jason could hardly breathe as the billionaire himself stepped forward, his sharp eyes locking onto him. Everything felt surreal. This couldn't be happening. "You are Jason Miller," Kingston said, his voice carrying authority. It wasn't a question, it was a statement, as if he already knew everything about him. Jason swallowed hard and nodded. "Yes, sir." Kingston studied him for a moment, then turned to his father. "Your name is Benjamin Miller." It wasn't a question either. "You worked for me once, many years ago." Jason's father hesitated before nodding. "Yes, sir. A long time ago, I worked on one of your early agricultural projects." Kingston gave a small nod, then turned his gaze back to Jason. "And from what I understand, your son was expelled from Westbridge Academy yesterday." Jason's stomach twisted at the reminder. He lowered his gaze, clenching his jaw. "Yes," he admitted quietly. There was a pause. Then Kingston's voice came firm and clear. "Get in the helicopter." Jason's breath caught. "What?" Kingston's tone didn't waver. "You're coming with me. We have unfinished business at Westbridge Academy." Jason looked at his parents, his heart racing. This was insane. This was impossible. And yet, deep down, he knew his life was about to change forever. Jason's hands felt clammy as he stepped into the helicopter, his heart pounding so loudly he thought everyone could hear it. His father gave him a reassuring nod, though his eyes held a mixture of pride and confusion. His mother, still in shock, whispered, "Be careful, son." But Jason had no time to process what was happening. Within seconds, the helicopter doors shut, and the blades roared to life, lifting them off the ground. He sat stiffly across from Samuel Kingston, who studied him in silence for a long moment before finally speaking. "You don't know why I'm here, do you?" Jason shook his head, still trying to wrap his mind around the situation. Kingston leaned back, his sharp eyes never leaving Jason. "Years ago, your father worked for me, not just as a farmer, but as one of the men who helped me build my first successful agricultural project. He was one of the few who believed in my vision when no one else did." Jason looked up in surprise. He had never heard this before. Kingston continued, "Your father left before I could repay him. He chose a simple life for your family. But that doesn't mean I forgot him. Or you." He paused. "I've been keeping an eye on you, Jason. Your academic achievements, your hard work. And yesterday, when I heard what happened at Westbridge Academy, I knew it was time for me to step in." Jason's mind reeled. Samuel Kingston had been watching him, and now he was taking him back to the school that had thrown him out. The tension in his chest tightened as the helicopter began its descent. Through the window, Jason saw the familiar school grounds of Westbridge Academy. The entire student body had gathered outside, their heads tilted upward in disbelief. As the helicopter touched down, the scene was eerily quiet. Nobody dared to move. Teachers exchanged nervous glances, and students whispered furiously among themselves. Jason could see Mason standing with his group, his face pale, his usual smug confidence gone. Principal Carter, on the other hand, tried to mask his unease, forcing a welcoming smile as Kingston stepped out. "Mr. Kingston," the principal started, his voice carrying a slight tremble. "What an unexpected honor." Kingston didn't acknowledge the pleasantries. Instead, he turned to Jason. "Come." Jason swallowed hard and stepped out of the helicopter. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. The same people who had laughed at him yesterday were now staring at him in stunned silence. Kingston walked straight toward the principal, his steps slow and deliberate. "You expelled this boy," he said flatly. Principal Carter adjusted his tie, forcing a chuckle. "Well, Mr. Kingston, we have strict policies." And Jason, Kingston raised a hand, cutting him off. His voice remained calm, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. "You expelled him because of his background, because he is the son of a farmer." The murmurs in the crowd turned into full-blown whispers. Some of the teachers looked away, their discomfort evident. Carter's face flushed. "Sir, that's not exactly—" Kingston didn't let him finish. Westbridge Academy prides itself on being an elite institution. But let me remind you of something. Agriculture is the foundation of this country. Without farmers, there is no food, no economy, no survival. Few students shifted uncomfortably, realization dawning on them. Jason stood frozen, his heart hammering in his chest. Kingston's gaze darkened. "This school is not as prestigious as you think it is, and after today, I doubt many respectable families will want their children to be associated with an institution that disrespects the very people who keep this country running." Principal Carter's mask of confidence began to crack. "Mr. Kingston, I assure you." Kingston turned to Jason. "Do you want to come back here?" Jason hesitated. This was everything he had wanted. A chance to reclaim his place, to prove he belonged. But as he looked around at the faces staring at him, something inside him shifted. Did he really want to be a part of a school that only valued him now because of Kingston's influence? The air felt thick with anticipation. The students, the teachers, even Mason, everyone was waiting for his answer. Jason took a deep breath and met Kingston's gaze. "No, sir, I don't." A hush fell over the crowd. Principal Carter blinked in shock. Even Kingston seemed slightly surprised. But then his lips curled into a small, approving smile. Jason turned to face the students. "I don't need this school to succeed, and I don't need people like you," he said, his voice steady. "Respect isn't about money, it's about character. And if this school can't see that, then it's not the kind of place I want to be." For the first time, Jason saw something shift in the faces around him. Some students lowered their heads, ashamed. Others looked thoughtful, as if seeing him in a new light. Even Mason looked uncertain, as if realizing the weight of what had just happened. Kingston placed a hand on Jason's shoulder. Good choice. Then he turned back to Carter. Consider this your warning. Change the way you run this school, or next time, I won't be so forgiving. Without another word, Kingston turned and led Jason back to the helicopter. This crowd parted as they passed, silent and stunned. As the helicopter lifted off, Jason looked down at the school one last time. He had walked in yesterday, feeling small and powerless, but today he was leaving with his head held high, knowing he was worth more than the opinions of those who had once looked down on him. He didn't know what came next, but as he glanced at Kingston beside him, he had a feeling this was only the beginning of something much bigger. As the helicopter soared higher, Jason stared out the window, watching the school shrink beneath him. A strange sense of relief settled in his chest. Just yesterday, he had felt like his world had ended when he was expelled. Now he realized it had only been the beginning of something greater. Samuel Kingston sat beside him, silent for a while. Then he spoke, his voice thoughtful. "You handled that well." Jason turned to him. "I just said what I felt." Kingston nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "And that's exactly why I'm offering you something bigger." Jason frowned. "What do you mean?" Kingston leaned forward slightly. "I don't just want to help you. I want to invest in you." Jason's heart skipped a beat. "Invest?" Kingston's eyes shone with something Jason couldn't quite place. "You have something that can't be taught. Courage, integrity. That's rare in people, especially in those who've been given everything. You don't wait for opportunities. You fight for them. That's the kind of person who can truly make a difference." Jason was speechless. This was the same man who had built an empire, sitting in front of him, saying he had what it took to succeed. Kingston continued, "I want to sponsor your education, anywhere in the world you choose. But more than that, I want you to work with me, learn from me. Not because of your father's past, but because I see a future in you." Jason's mind raced. A day ago, he had been crushed under the weight of rejection, believing that his dreams had been stolen from him. Now, he was being handed something even greater. He looked out the window again, his thoughts swirling. Then he turned back to Kingston, his decision clear. "I want to earn it." Kingston raised an eyebrow. "Oh," Jason nodded. "I don't want it just because you're offering. I want to prove that I deserve it. Let me start at the bottom, work my way up." Kingston studied him for a long moment before breaking into a wide grin. "You really are something else, kid." For the first time, Jason felt like he truly belonged somewhere. Not in a school that judged him by his background, but in a world where effort, honesty, and resilience mattered more than privilege. Months passed, and Jason immersed himself in learning everything he could. Kingston didn't hand him an easy path. He made him work for it. From early mornings in fields to late-night business meetings, Jason learned about agriculture, business, and leadership firsthand. Word about what had happened at Westbridge Academy spread fast. The school faced backlash for how they had treated Jason, forcing them to change their policies. Principal Carter, once so sure of his power, was soon replaced by someone who valued fairness over status. Even Mason, who had always mocked Jason, reached out with an apology. But by then, Jason had moved far beyond needing validation from his past. Years later, Jason stood on the balcony of a high-rise office, looking out over acres of farmland, land he had helped develop into something revolutionary. Beside him, Kingston watched with pride. "You were right," Kingston said. "You did earn it." Jason smiled. He had started as the farmer's son, who was told he wasn't good enough. But now, he was standing here, not just as a businessman, but as someone who had proved that true worth isn't measured by where you come from. It's measured by what you do with what you're given. As he looked at the land, stretching far and wide, Jason knew his journey was far from over. But one thing was certain. He was exactly where he was meant to be,